Hi everyone, this is our channel, Meet the Real Story. Please like, share and subscribe.
Hello there, my name is Pearls. The first day of my professional life was the worst professional day ever. During my first year at college, I wanted to spare my parents some of the expenses. So I took a job, and it happened to be the closest thing I could get to my dream job. It was an office that was mainly concerned with planning fashion shows. I know I was only an intern at the moment, but I have never been so excited in my life. I was actually studying fashion designing, so lucky me. But since we all know that life isn't always pink and roses, I had a repulsive boss. Let's call her Jane. I was Employee of the Month 3 times in a row. My life couldn't get any better. Well, except for Jane, who always thought I made her the worst coffee ever, yet she still drinks it. The closest colleague I had at work was a guy named Mark. I also had a tiny little crush on him, but that is not our point here. Anyways, I was supposed to organize a huge event. And so Jane sent an extra long office-wide email giving out details about the event and the brand and who was assigned to do what. I was ecstatic. I was running around the office like a busy bee that had to make sure everything was in place. After a long, tiring day, I was at my desk, rereading the email she sent and enjoying a good cup of coffee. And guess what? Jane had about a gazillion typos, and to be honest, I wanted something to cool me off after doing so much. And being the smart employee that I am, I wanted to crack a good joke and maybe, just maybe, get Mark to laugh. I wrote a sarcastic, full of mockery email, and once I've hit send, I heard gasps echoing around the office, and I realized that I had clicked reply all. Jane called and wanted to see me at her office. My knees were all spaghetti-like, and I wore my heart down my sleeve. And to my greatest surprise, Jane took it too well. She told me, and I'm quoting, "I think you have a great sense of humor." She even offered me to become her own personal assistant and the big event hostess. And not after a long time, Jane had ruined my promotion happiness. She showered me with paperwork that I had to stay up until 1 in the morning to get done. And when the big day was finally here and I was getting ready for the event, I got a bit too excited and I went to the office all dressed up. I saw Mark and tried to act as smooth as I could. Well, I tripped over and I ripped off my dress. Jane came out of her office at the same exact moment, and again she saved my life. She lent me one of her super expensive dresses that I'm sure it cost her a big fortune. And that, my friends, was one mistake that I have totally nailed. Hello, my name is Kate. Now I'm going to say this. I am by no means a saint, and the only reason I brought this up is later in the story. So, I dated this guy in high school for 2 years. He was the love of my life, and I planned on marrying him. His dad became super controlling, and eventually he forced us to break up. He immediately got into a relationship with another girl, and I moved on. Later on, I met this guy who we will call Max, and he was a mix between country and scene. He liked artists like Lil Peep and also was in love with horses. He had a girlfriend who lived across the country, but we stayed friends. They eventually broke up, and naturally, we both grew closer. Dear God, I regret ever saying yes to going out with him. The first 2 months, they were constant fighting. He wanted us to visit his ex girlfriend because she was failing college and addicted to coke while we were together. He would sometimes text her while he was at my house or while we were at dinner, but eventually he quit. The next few months were okay at best. He would constantly start fights with my male friends and even assumed I was cheating on him with one friend who at the time did have a crush on me. But I'm a very loyal person who went as far as to put more of my time into hanging out with my boyfriend than my friends. Eventually, we went on a cruise and he got high with a group of girls and kissed one of them. I cut it off and went on to date others. So he texted me 3 months after breaking up, saying he wants to talk and apologize for what he did. I was still in love with him, so I agreed and we set up a time for when he could come over. I knew instantly when he pulled into my driveway that I was going to regret ever responding. There was no hug, no I miss you, none of that. Instead, he walks up to me, looks me in the eye, and says, I want to get this out of the way. I've dated a lot of people since we broke up. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I mean, I did the same when we broke up. So I kind of agreed to being just friends and never go back to talking about getting back together for now. But then comes the bullshit. He calls me one night and says, Hey, I want to get back with you. Because honestly, wandering around is boring, and I don't want to jump into things instantly. And I was wondering if dating without labels would be okay with you. When I asked him to elaborate, he replied, as in, I can still go to dinner with other girls, you can go to dinner with other guys, and we'll see what happens. Needless to say, I hung up without saying a word. Told him thanks, but no thanks. You are not who you used to be, and I'm not interested anymore. Bonus chapter. He stopped a few weeks, but he would periodically send me pictures of him at parties or on dates with other girls or pictures of his private areas. Anyways, ever since he has been blocked on everything, but I just thought I would share this with you. This is a shout out to every girl out there. Please find someone that's worth your love and affection, not someone who wants to play with it. I have drank and I've used drugs, but I've never suffered from withdrawals. I've never chosen drugs or alcohol over my loved ones. And I have never stolen anything in order to score. I'm not an addict, but I love one, and sometimes that's an addiction. Like so many other teens and young adults, I experimented with my fair share of recreational drugs and alcohol in high school. So when my younger sister started doing the same thing when she was 14, I wrote off her new habits as reckless, youthful behavior. She would grow out of this phase eventually, I thought, just like I did. But instead of getting bored with the lifestyle and moving on, she craved more of it, and by the time she was 19, the party drugs she was using were not even enough for her. And that's when she found heroin. One of the first things that gave away her addiction was her eyes, usually big and blue and full of light. They became dark and dodgy orbs that could never quite focus, never look you back, never hold your gaze. The look I had once found in them was long gone, and I felt uneasy whenever our eyes met, which, as she began to use more, became less and less frequent. As drugs became a bigger part of her life, everything else became smaller, even me. The days of us driving around our small town in my car, smoking a ball and blasting Sublime, were replaced with quick visits to her darkened bedroom, a space that I had left her in after I went off to college, which had transformed from a teenage safe haven into a dark cave filled with cigarette smoke, empty booze bottles, and stash boxes of every kind of opiate you could imagine, including heroin, oxycodone, and opium. The evidence was right in front of me, but sometimes it's easier to ignore the obvious than it is to embrace the uncomfortable. When we went out, which was rare because it was nearly impossible to get my sister away from the comfort cave she had built for herself, I wrote off her frequent visits to the bathroom and lack of appetite as stomach problems or even body issues. When she didn't laugh at our favorite comedy sketches, I told myself that maybe she'd just seen it too many times for it to be funny anymore. When she stayed up until 4 a.m. in the morning and slept until 3 p.m., and when she started wearing long clothes in 90-degree weather, when she couldn't hold a job, when she got her hands on money she couldn't explain, and when I actually found her stash in her purse when I was snooping one day, I just kept telling myself, she's young, she's rebelling, she'll move past this phase. I was 24 and living in Brooklyn when my 21-year-old sister called me and admitted it. Plainly and almost optimistically, she was an addict. I think you already know this, she said, voice shaky and a little too loud. But I have a drug problem. Her confession gave me no choice but to admit it too. And suddenly, my entire world had changed. The lying, the stealing, the cheating, the messy parts of an addict's life don't really change from one user to the next. They're just as dark, just as sad, and just as unforgivable as you would imagine they would be. And they're not worth the reliving and writing because I relive them every day in my own mind. Loving a drug addict is all consuming and inescapable. It's on your mind all the time. You become a husk of a human whose insides have been entirely replaced by anger, fear, and resentment, and suddenly those feelings start to bubble over into every part of your life. The little voices in your head start to tell you to be suspicious of everyone in your life. Because if this one person could betray you, if your loved one could steal from you, if your own little sister could stare you straight in the eyes and swear up and down they haven't used, when you know damn well they're hiding the drugs in their bra, then who can you trust? Your constant suspicion makes you angry too. Angry at your loved one for getting addicted in the first place. Furious at the family who sat back and watched it happen. And bitter with the entire world for allowing a problem like this to exist. But it's the guilt that hurts me most of all. Because I have taken her addiction and made it my own. Because of the darkest question in my mind isn't about whether or not my sister will live to her 25th birthday, but rather how I could have prevented it all by her 15th birthday. We grew up in a small town, and my sister and I, we were 3 years apart, were close in as preteens and as teens. We did all the normal things sisters do together shopping, movie nights, annoying our mother. But we also did the normal things bored kids from a small town do together. And that included drinking, drugs, and partying. By the time I was a senior in high school and she was a freshman, we skipped out on the first period of school in favor of a ball cruise and a late breakfast at the diner in the next town over. When I went off to college,